You think the era of the ancient Egyptians is over? Don't be so quick to assume. Countless artifacts still lie dormant in the hot desert sand, waiting to give us a vivid glimpse into the past. From stunning statues to demonic drawings to long-lost metropolises, here are several Egyptian discoveries that will leave us baffled. Before we get started, be sure to hit the like button and ring the notification bell for more videos. Also, stick around until the end to see one of the most confusing Egyptian discoveries thus far. Lost artifact. An original height of 146 meters, around 2.65 million stone blocks, and yet only 3 recovered artifacts. Yes, you heard correctly. Only 3 objects were tracked down inside the world-famous Cheops pyramid. Against this background, it seems all the more incomprehensible that one of these special finds simply got lost over time. In 1872, Wayman Dixon discovered a bullet, hook, and fragment of wood in the belly of the ancient wonder of the world. The latter was thought to be irretrievably lost until recently, but then the unbelievable news broke. The lost find had been in the possession of the University of Aberdeen the whole time. However, it had been mistakenly assigned to the Asia collection. This mishap was only revealed when Abir El-Adani undertook a re-examination of the items. Experts are currently working all out to decipher the original purpose of the relic. Ramses statue. In 2019, a wave of enthusiasm swept through the ranks of the experts. After all, the researchers had landed an archaeological bullseye, which they subsequently described as one of the rarest discoveries ever. In detail, it was an ancient pink statue of the famous pharaoh Ramses II. In addition, the 1-meter-tall figure is adorned with a so-called Ka symbol. In the belief of the ancient Egyptians, this was the part of the soul that survived death and then continued to exist independently. This, and the fact that the artifact is made entirely of pink granite, created an overwhelming response from archaeologists. The location of the statue was quite curious. It was recovered on the property of a man who had previously been targeted by officials for illegal excavations. Up until this archaeological sensation, the researchers had only tracked down one statue of Ramses with a Ka symbol, but it was made of wood. Although the mighty king, who was in power for around 66 years, died in 1213 BC, the find is still in remarkably good condition after all this time. Strange stains. Tutankhamun was only 9 years old when he ascended the throne of the Egyptian Empire. In retrospect, it's assumed that the child king was strongly influenced by his advisors and steered in specific directions. About 10 years later, Tutankhamun's short life was to be over, and both the circumstances of his death and the burial site are still a great mystery to this day. When Howard Carter rediscovered the complex in the Valley of the Kings in 1922, he was greatly puzzled by its small size. In addition, the strange black spots in the burial chamber have always caused big question marks over the heads of experts. This is mold on the walls, a substance found nowhere else in the Valley of the Kings. At first, the researchers believed that the mold formed from the breath and sweat of the countless tourists. However, the black spots were already on the walls when Carter tracked down the tomb. This suggests that the burial chamber was sealed before the paint had dried properly. In other words, the workers were in a hurry to finish building the final resting place. Normally, painting a royal tomb took several years. In the case of Tutankhamun, those responsible should not have needed much longer than a week. We still don't know what was behind this hasty approach. Gold and silver death masks. As we all know, the ancient Egyptians practiced their own burial rituals. It's well known that they mummified their deceased and placed the most precious gifts in their graves, but that the dead were covered with magnificent masks made of silver, gold, and precious stones is an absolute rarity. A few years ago, researchers came across an untouched tomb in the Saqqara necropolis. In detail, it was the final resting place of a priest buried in the 7th century BC. Although the condition of the wooden sarcophagus was pitiful, that of the metal death mask was exceptionally good. The analysis showed that the mask is made of silver and was even partially gilded. 2 valuable gemstones served as eyes, possibly obsidian or onyx. Nowadays, finding death masks made of precious metal is a real rarity. This is not least due to the fact that the graves of many ancient Egyptian dignitaries were looted centuries ago. Notepads. For some time now, the so-called Athribis project has been pursuing the goal of fully exploring the ancient Egyptian city that gave it its name. And in fact, the experts recently managed to get a real sensation in this regard, which could help to unveil further secrets of the long-lost village. In total, the archaeologists found more than 18,000 ancient notepads here, many of which were written in Greek. What we call post-its today was called ostraka in ancient times, pieces of pottery that were written on. Just as in our modern days, the objects were used on a wide variety of occasions even back then. For example, shopping lists, trade records, and even schoolwork have been immortalized on them. In contrast to the valuable papyrus, ostraka were significantly cheaper, which is why they enjoyed great popularity in everyday life. The Egyptians probably used reeds dipped in ink to write down their notes. Most of the artifacts discovered in Athribis came from an ancient school. More than 100 clay discs are likely to embody the result of detention, because thousands of years ago, rebellious school children had to repeatedly write sentences. Ancient tombs. The mighty Cheops pyramid was created around 4,500 years ago. Well, by this time, the recently discovered tombs had been completed for more than 500 years. Found in the eastern Nile Delta, the 110 coffins in total come from 2 different epochs, with the first being dated to around 3,300 to 3,100 BC. The discovery of this cemetery is of particular interest to researchers because it gives us a vivid glimpse into part of the earliest ancient Egyptian era. Archaeologists also found much younger coffins here, dating back to the Hyksos period. This group of foreign kings ruled Egypt from about 1648 to 1550 BC. Finds like this help scholars understand how Egyptian traditions changed under the influence of foreign rulers. New Sphinx. We all know the world-famous Sphinx that has been guarding the Giza Plateau for thousands of years. However, we shouldn't forget that this was by no means the only stone hybrid creature that the inhabitants of the pharaohs made over time. A few months ago, a team of German and Egyptian researchers succeeded in bringing 2 of these monumental statues back to daylight. When the ancient site was restored, the half-submerged artifacts were also discovered. The 2 sphinxes are each 8 meters long, with one of the statues bearing the words, "The Beloved of Amun-Re" on its chest, probably referring to Amenhotep III. It was depicted wearing a magnificent headdress, a royal beard, and a wide necklace. Bizarre mummies. In February 2021, archaeologists uncovered 16 graves on the outskirts of Alexandria. However, 2 of the mummies presented themselves in a particularly strange condition. The dead had golden tongues placed in their mouths. Experts suspect that the sparkling artifacts were intended to help the deceased speak in the afterlife. A few weeks later, another, but no less interesting find followed. In the town of Sohag, researchers discovered the remains of a 5,000-year-old brewery. The ancient Egyptian brew could have been used in the burials of the first pharaohs. In contrast to our modern beer, however, Egyptian beer was a kind of porridge with a very low alcohol content. Secret cave in the Grand Canyon. Around 450 kilometers long, between 6 and 30 kilometers wide, and up to 1,800 meters deep. The Grand Canyon in the north of the U.S. state of Arizona is undoubtedly one of the most spectacular natural attractions our planet has to offer. In view of the fact that the gigantic gorge attracts thousands of visitors from all over the world every year, we should not forget that the world-famous Grand Canyon has also been the focus of wild speculation before. A local newspaper from Phoenix, Arizona reported in 1909 that an ancient Egyptian cave had been found in the middle of the Grand Canyon. From an official historical perspective, however, it could only be a hoax. After all, to the best of our knowledge, no inhabitant of the Pharaonic kingdoms ever set foot on the North American continent. Nevertheless, or precisely because of this, we should take a closer look at the content of the more than 100-year-old newspaper report. According to the story, an explorer was on the Colorado River when he saw a mysterious cave in the cliffs on the banks. Excited by his discovery, the man immediately contacted Smithsonian Institute staff, who took on the ensuing investigation. What happened next is hard to believe. The workers are said to have recovered a whopping 40 truckloads of ancient Egyptian artifacts from the mysterious cave. The walls of the natural cavity are said to have been decorated with hundreds of hieroglyphs. Since this revolutionary discovery would have thrown the entirety of history into chaos, the Smithsonian Institute staff is said to have immediately tried to cover up this sensational discovery. Consequently, all evidence that the Egyptians had once been in North America was promptly destroyed. The exciting stories about the Grand Canyon are also fueled by the rumor that there's a hermetically sealed exclusion zone inside the gorge that no one is allowed to enter. There's said to be further evidence that the stunning natural wonder was once visited by people we would never have guessed, and that they may have spent hundreds of years there. Aten. Named after the sun god Aten, the ancient Egyptian city near Luxor was probably inhabited for around 2,000 years. However, knowledge of the location of the ancient village was lost over the centuries before it was rediscovered in September 2020. The researchers were actually looking for the ruins of Tutankhamun's mortuary temple, but as it turned out, they found what was by far the largest economic and administrative center of the era. So we're dealing with nothing less than the most important find in Egypt since the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. Although the excavation work is still in full swing, experts are already overwhelmed by the amazing condition of the remains. In fact, the exceptional level of preservation of Aten can even be compared to that of Pompeii. So far, many areas enclosed by adobe walls have resurfaced, including a bakery district brimming with everyday objects. We don't know much about the town for certain, but we have reason to believe that the town may have at some point been the largest metropolis in all of ancient Egypt. We have evidence that suggests that the town would have been at the forefront of Egyptian culture, standing as a town where trading would have taken place, as well as countless other acts of business. By all means, Aten would have been the epicenter for nearly every important deal that took place in ancient Egypt, and would have likely been the most important economic and administrative town at the time. When the town was built, ancient Egypt would have been in its prime. The discovery and research surrounding this town have shed a lot of light on Egyptian culture, but the discovery has also provided us with many more questions than answers. Researchers are hopeful that as they continue to uncover new information about the town, they may learn more about ancient Egyptian rulers. For example, we'd love to learn more about Akhenaten and Nefertiti, as well as their strange and seemingly random decision to move to Tel El Amarna. Since we know that Aten would have dissolved around the same time, there may be information here that could help us understand what truly happened during that time and what eventually led to the downfall of Aten. Mysterious liquid in a sarcophagus. Most of us can agree that Egyptian archaeological finds are truly remarkable. However, some of the most important and interesting findings relate to the sarcophagi that can be found in the ruins of ancient Egypt. These grave markers give us a much closer look into the culture of the country at that point in time, showing us just how important burial rituals and the afterlife were to the ancient Egyptians. An ancient coffin was exhumed from Egypt several years ago. Researchers were hopeful that this coffin would help to shed additional light on some of the burial rituals that were popular at the time. However, some researchers were hopeful that this coffin may contain the long-lost body of Alexander the Great as well. However, as experts were removing the coffin from its burial place, they began to notice that everything was not as it seemed. As soon as they took a look inside of the coffin, they made a grisly discovery that was unlike anything they could have expected. As they peered inside, they learned that the coffin did not contain the bones of the incredible leader known as Alexander. Instead, it contains the remains of 3 people who had all been tightly buried together in a small chamber. On top of this, the coffin had apparently not been sealed well, or the seal had withered away after thousands of years. They knew this because the coffin had also been filled with a mysterious liquid substance that could not be explained. Some researchers speculate that this red liquid may have intentionally been placed inside of the coffin, but no one knows for sure. The broth was said to have been incredibly smelly, though some locals wanted to take samples of the liquid to use it for their own private desires, whatever those may have been. Researchers obviously did not let this take place, and they soon learned that the liquid was not intentionally placed inside of the coffin. Instead, they found out that the liquid was, in fact, sewage that had leaked into the coffin over the course of many years. The experts were never able to determine who had been buried in the coffin, but they believe the bones belonged to a warrior, as they found a skull wound that appeared to have been caused by an arrow. Alright folks, it's your turn. Which find fascinated you the most? Hit the keys and let us know in the comments. Also, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like to hear more regularly about the most spectacular discoveries of all time. Thanks for watching, take care, and see you next time.